Good morning and good afternoon. We are going to be factoring today, but first I want you to do the warm-up. So hit pause, do the warm-up, and then whenever you check it, I will have the answers on here. So go ahead, hit pause and do them. Okay, your answers, you should have gotten x squared plus 11x plus 28, because you had to use distribution. For B, you should have had x squared plus 6x minus 27. And for C, x squared minus 11x plus 30. So notice that when you multiply binomials, this is 1, 2 terms, 1, 2 terms. So this is a binomial, another binomial, 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 binomial. But the constant term in the trinomial is what? So this right here, this 28, this negative 27. This 30, they all have something in common. See if you can figure out what they all have in common. Did anybody think to themselves, well, every single time, 4 times 7, positive 28. Negative 3 times positive 9, negative 27. Negative 5 times negative 6 is positive 30. Interesting. So the constant term is always the multiplication of the two last terms. What do you notice about the middle term of the trinomial? And what do you notice about its coefficient? Well look at 4 plus 7 is 11. Negative 3 plus positive 9 is positive 6. Negative 5 plus negative 6 is negative 11. So you add the last two terms. Now before we start factoring, I want you to take a minute and jot down these factoring steps. You have 4 blanks in your notes. Please hit pause and write down these steps. The first one, these are kind of like your brownie points. Every single one of your answers here, notice, or your beginning part, they all were 2 binomials. So you're going to have 2 parentheses. This is like your brownie points. Always do that first. Then you're going to find the factors of the first and the last term. For each one of these ones, like when we had x plus 4 and x plus 7, the factors of your first term, these were both 1. So 1 and 1, that's why we got them. Then you're going to find the sum of the factors of the last term and see which equals the middle term. And then last but not least, check by distribution. So always check it. You can know if you have 100% or not for each one of these. So let's go ahead and let's do it. Factoring is so fun. It says factor each trinomial and check your answer. You know, we're just going backwards. We had 2 binomials and we distributed to get this. Now we're going to go backwards. So the first thing I'm going to do is put my parentheses because I know that if I distribute, I can get it. So the second step said to find the factors of your first and last term. So this is my first term, this is my last term. So first and last. I'm going to make a little T-chart. Well, this is, okay, so the factors of the first term, so we have first and last, and you know that this equals 2 parentheses. So if that's a 1, we can have 1 times 1. Your last term is 36, so we could have 1 times 36. That's a factor. 1 and 36. You could have 2 and 18, but the third step said to sum this. So if I'm summing 1 plus 36, I get 37. 2 plus 18, well, that's not 15. 2 plus 18 is 20, that's not 15. Let's try 3. 3 times 12, that's 36. 3 plus 12 is 15. Ding, 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 ding. Notice that these are both positive. So whenever I plug them in, I know that it's 1x and 1x, but we don't need to write that. So we have x plus 3 and x plus 12. You could have x plus 12, x plus 3, doesn't matter. So now if I check by distribution, x times x is x squared. X times 12 is positive 12x. Positive 3 times x is positive 3x. And positive 3 times 12 is plus 36. Combine our like terms, so we get x squared plus 15x plus 36. That's my original. I'm good to go. I can circle my answer now. I'm good to go. Okay, for the next one, let's go ahead and first part, make our parentheses. Now we're going to find the factors of first and the last term. The first one, it's still just 1 times 1. The last one, factors of 5. Well, the only ones are 1 and 5 because it's prime. So 1 plus 5 is 6. That is my middle term. Oh, they're both positive again. So I get x plus 1, x plus 5. Let's do a quick distribution check. X times x is x squared. X times 5 is positive 5x. 1 times x is plus x. 1 times 5 is plus 5. 5x plus x is 6x plus 5x squared plus. Good to go. Here is our answer. Okay, let's try letter C. Now, the first term and the last term, we have to find those factors. So make our brownie points, but think here. It's x squared minus 8x plus 15. That's going to come into play. Our first is just 1 times 1 again, so we know we have just x and x. Our last term is 15, so we have 1 and 15. Add those together, that's 16. That's certainly not 8. We could have 2, doesn't go into it, 3 and 5. That equals positive 8. But this is a negative 8. Let's think about this. Well, what is negative 3 times negative 5? Wasn't that positive 15? But when you add negative 3 plus negative 5, you get negative 8. So you had 2 negatives. So whenever you put those in, you just get x minus 3, x minus 5. So whenever you get the same number but the wrong sign, just make them both negative. Let's check it by distribution. X times x is x squared. X times negative 5 is negative 5x. Negative 3 times x is negative 3x. Negative 3 times negative 5 is positive 15. Add these two together. X squared minus 8x plus 15. We are good to go. Let's check the last one. Notice D is very, very similar to C. There's a minus in the middle here. So what do you think you're going to have? I agree. I think we're going to have 2 negatives because it was very similar. So if I look at my first and my last, make a little table, make my brownie points. My first one, again, is just a 1. 1 times 1 is the only way. So it has to be x and x. Now the factors of 48, I'm just going to start at the beginning. If I start at 48, I have to have 1 and 48. But when I sum those together, I'm just going to make a third column just for my sum. 1 plus 48 is 49. Definitely not 19. How about 2 and 24? Well, those add together to be 28. Still not 19. 3, let's see, 3 and 16. Well, those equal 19. But we said they need to be 2 negatives. So if I do negative 3 times negative 16, but when I add those together, I get negative 19. So I could get x minus 3 and x minus 16. Let's just do a quick check. X times x is x squared. X times negative 16 is negative 16x. Negative 3 times x is negative 3x. And negative 3 times negative 16 is positive 48. Add them together. Negative 19x plus 48 and x squared. There we go. So now I have a question for you. What do you know about the factorization when the constant of the trinomial is positive? Notice here, positive 36, positive 5, positive 48, positive 15. Well, you either had x plus times x plus or x minus times x minus. Pretty cool, huh? Okay, well let's do some now, I bet you can guess, where it's not positive, where your constant is negative. We're going to do the exact same process. So I know this is going to equal my brownie points, find my first, my last, and I'm just going to make another column for sum. My first is just the 1, 1 times 1, that's it, so I know it can be x and x. Now, to multiply together to equal a negative, since this is negative, we have to have one positive and one negative. So they multiply together to be negative 20. So I could do negative 1 times 20. But when I add those two together, negative 1 plus 20 is 19. That certainly is not 1. I need to get a sum that equals 1. I could have had negative 2 times 10, but when I sum that together, that only equals 8, which is definitely not it. How about negative 4 times 5? Oh, that equals 1. So it looks like I found it. Since I have one positive and one negative, I'll have x minus 4, x plus 5. And again, you could check it by distribution. X times x is x squared. X times positive 5 is plus 5x. Negative 4 times x is negative 4x. Negative 4 times positive 5 is negative 20. Add them together, you get 1x minus 20, x squared plus, and you're good to go. Alrighty, let's go with B. Again, we have a negative, so I have to have one positive and one negative. So I'm going to have, I'm going to make my first, last, sum. Make my little table first. It's just a 1, so it's 1 times 1, x and x. Now, numbers that multiply together to be negative 18. I bet you're starting to be able to do the sum in your head. That's the goal, that eventually you'll be able to just pick up on it right away. If you look, okay, well, how about 3 times negative 6? 3 times negative 6 is negative 18, but when you add them together, you get negative 3. Yay! So we get plus 3 minus 6. And if you did your distribution, it would check out and you'd be good. Letter C, let's go ahead again. Do our first. We have first, last, and this time our sum has to equal negative 13. And if you're having trouble with remembering, you could even write down negative 48, but those have to be the factors, and it has to be 1 times 1. So we have x and x, factors that multiply to be together to be negative 48. We can have negative 2 times 24. When you add those together, definitely not 8, you get 22. How about negative 6 times 8? But when you add those together, you get positive 2. How about negative 3 times 16? Well, negative 3 times 16 gives me positive 13. I needed negative. Oh, wait, let's just switch the signs. How about 3 times negative 16? Oh, that gives me negative 13. So we found it. So we have x plus 3, x minus 16. Woohoo! That is such a good feeling. Okay, let's do this one. Put our brownie points first, last. They have to multiply to be negative 20, and the sum has to equal negative 8. See if you can figure out what they are right away. First, we just have 1 and 1. So we have x and x. Multiply together to be negative 20, but add together to be negative 8. How about 2 times negative 10? But 2 plus negative 10 is negative 8. So since the 2 is positive, it's plus 2 minus 10. So what do you notice about whenever the constant is negative? Notice for each one you had x plus and x minus for each one of those. So in general, take a second and hit pause and write down, when you have plus and plus, you have x plus, minus, negative and positive, you had x minus, negative and negative, positive, negative, negative, negative. So basically anytime C is negative, you have one of each. Okay, last but not least, we're going to go ahead, first we're going to factor, we're going to skip that right there for right now. And we're going to do the construction one. It says the area of a rectangular fountain is x squared plus 12x plus 20 feet. You will go to the next video for this problem.